We've all seen it. The glorious Viking warrior, clashing steel, roaring defiance before falling in a hail of arrows, only to be swept up by a winged, armor-clad Valkyrie to an eternity of feasting and fighting in Valhalla. It's an awesome, romantic image, burned into our minds by comics, video games, and movies. But what if I told you that's mostly a Hollywood fantasy? A dramatic oversimplification of something far stranger, more complex, and frankly, more human than you can imagine. Forget the simple idea of Valhalla as a warrior's heaven. For the Norse peoples of the Viking Age, death wasn't a single door, but a crossroads with many paths. There were multiple afterlives, and getting into them wasn't about good versus evil, but something else entirely. Their real beliefs were a tangled web of honor, fate, family, and fear. They believed souls could be split apart, ancestors lived on in their burial mounds, and a terrifying fate awaited those who failed to find rest, a fate far worse than any hell. So, what did the Vikings truly believe happened after death? The answer isn't simple, but it takes us to the very heart of the Norse worldview, revealing what they valued, what they feared, and what it truly meant to be immortal. The reality is much more fascinating. The warrior's choice, more than just Valhalla. Let's start with the most famous destination, Valhalla. It's the brand name of the Viking Afterlife, the Hall of the Glorious Dead. Ruled by the Allfather Odin, Valhalla is described in ancient texts as a magnificent hall with a roof of golden shields and rafters of spears. This was for warriors who died bravely in battle, chosen from the field by the formidable Valkyries, Odin's supernatural shield maidens. But Valhalla wasn't some paradise where you kicked back and relaxed. It was a perpetual training ground. The chosen warriors, the Einherjar, would spend their days fighting in epic, bloody combat, only to be miraculously healed by nightfall. They'd then feast on the meat of a cosmic boar, who was resurrected each day to be cooked again, and drink endless horns of mead. This whole cycle had one single grim purpose: to create an elite army for Odin, ready to fight alongside the gods during Ragnarok, the prophesied end of the world. Valhalla wasn't a reward. It was a recruitment, a place for elite warriors picked for a divine military purpose. But here's the first huge crack in that pop culture myth. Valhalla wasn't the only destination for a fallen warrior. In fact, the poem Grimnismal from the Poetic Edda tells us that Odin only got half of those slain in battle. So where did the other half go? They went to Folkvangr, the field of the people, a realm ruled by a goddess just as powerful as Odin, Freya. And here's the crucial detail that upends the common narrative. Scholarly interpretations of the text suggest Freya got the first choice of the fallen. This is a monumental piece of the puzzle. Freya, often simplified today as just a goddess of love and beauty, was also a formidable goddess of war and magic. Her hall within Folkvangr is called Sessrumnir, the Hall of Many Seats. While the texts are less descriptive about daily life there, its existence proves the warrior's afterlife was a choice between two powerful deities. Why the split? The texts don't give us a clear checklist. Some scholars suggest it was related to different warrior cults, some dedicated to Odin, others to Freya. Others think Folkvangr might have been more inclusive, perhaps welcoming shield maidens or those who died defending their homes and families. One saga even tells of a noblewoman who declares she will starve herself to dying with Freya, implying Folkvangr was open to those who chose an honorable death, even if it wasn't in combat. The main thing to remember is this: even for the warrior, death wasn't a simple ticket to one place. It was a choice between two powerful gods, with the mighty goddess Freya taking her pick of the fallen. This alone shows the Viking spiritual landscape was far more balanced and complex than the Odin-centric version we're often sold. The warrior's afterlife wasn't just Valhalla. It was a divine draft, and Freya was picking first. The silent majority, the truth about hell. But warriors were a minority in Norse society. What about everyone else? What happened to the farmer who died in his sleep, the merchant who got sick on a long voyage, or the women and children? What afterlife awaited the vast majority who didn't die with a sword in hand? Their destination was a realm with a deceptively familiar name: Hell. Okay, but first, you have to completely erase the modern Christian image of hell from your mind. The Norse realm of Hell, sometimes called Helheim, has almost nothing in common with the fiery pit of punishment. The name just means concealed place. It wasn't for sinners. In the Norse worldview, your afterlife wasn't determined by moral judgment. Instead, where you went depended on just one thing: how you died. If you died a straw death, from sickness, old age, or any cause other than combat, you went to hell. This was the default afterlife for the silent majority. So what was it like? Sources describe hell as a dim, misty, and cold place at the roots of the world tree, Yggdrasil. It was ruled by a goddess of the same name, Hel, a daughter of Loki. She's often depicted as half-beautiful woman, half-decaying corpse, embodying her realm's nature as a place of both life and death. But despite its somber description, Hell wasn't a place of suffering. It was basically just a continuation of life, but in a different state. The dead in Hell were thought to do many of the same things they did in life: eat, drink, sleep, and socialize. The poem Baldur's Drummer even describes a hall in Hell being prepared for the god Baldur's arrival, lavishly decorated with gold and set for a grand feast. It wasn't a reward, but it wasn't a punishment either. It was simply what came next. The journey there was tough. A soul had to travel the Helvegr, the Hellway, a road leading down and north, and might have to cross a roaring river and pass a fearsome guardhound. This journey underscores that Hell was seen as inescapable. It's true that a later Christian writer, Snorri Sturluson, writing centuries after the Viking Age, tried to paint Hell in a more negative light, clearly influenced by Christian ideas. However, most scholars today agree this is a later spin and not authentic pagan belief. For the pre-Christian Norse, Hell was neutral ground, the great equalizer for kings and commoners who didn't fall in battle. It was a shadowy reflection of the world of the living, a place of stillness presided over by its stern, dutiful queen: the drowned, the buried, and the reborn. While Valhalla, Folkvanger, and Hell were the main destinations, the Norse spiritual map was dotted with other possibilities. Their beliefs weren't a neat system with three options. It was a messy, organic collection of beliefs that varied by region, proving just how fluid their idea of the afterlife really was. For a seafaring people like the Vikings, the ocean was both a source of life and a constant threat. So it's no surprise they believed it had its own afterlife. Those who drowned at sea didn't go to Valhalla or Hell. They were claimed by the goddess Ran. Ran was the fearsome personification of the sea's dark side. She was said to have a great net to drag sailors down into her hall at the bottom of the ocean. This wasn't necessarily a place of torment, but it was a distinct fate for those lost to the waves. Some sources suggest sailors carried gold with them as an offering to Ran, just in case they drowned, to ensure better treatment in her underwater realm. Beyond these divine realms, another powerful belief existed: that the dead didn't always go far. Some were thought to live on right, where they were buried in large burial mounds, or hogger. These mounds weren't just memorials. They were seen as the actual homes of the dead. The deceased, now a hogbui, or mound dweller, continued a physical existence inside their grave. These mound dwellers could be either helpful or harmful. A respected ancestor might be worshipped at their mound, with families leaving offerings. In return, the ancestor could bring good fortune or wisdom. The line between living and dead was blurry. Ancestors were still part of the community. Some even believed certain mountains were holy places inhabited by the spirits of entire families. And finally, Weaving through all these other beliefs was the idea of reincarnation. It wasn't a core doctrine like in some Eastern religions, but the idea that a soul could be reborn, especially within the same family, pops up in several sagas. This was often tied to naming. A newborn might get the name of a deceased grandparent, hoping their spirit and good fortune, their Hamingja, would pass to the child. The hero Helgi, for example, is said in the Poetic Edda to have been reborn multiple times. This shows yet another possible path for the soul, not a journey to another realm, but a return to this one. The fate they all feared, the restless dead with all these different afterlives. There was one fate that truly terrified the Vikings. It wasn't ending up in the cold plains of hell or the watery halls of Ran. The ultimate horror was not reaching an afterlife at all. The true terror was becoming a Draugr. A Draugr, meaning again walker, was the animated corpse of the dead that refused to stay in its grave. This wasn't a mindless zombie or a wispy ghost. A Draugr was a physical, evil being that kept the intelligence and memories of its old life, now twisted by rage or greed. They had immense supernatural strength, could shapeshift into monstrous animals, and even summon storms. A person could become a Draugr for a few reasons. Maybe they were exceptionally evil in life, or perhaps their burial rites were done improperly. Often, Draugr were warriors or chieftains buried with treasure, their greed binding them to their graves to guard their hoard. The sagas are filled with chilling stories of heroes confronting these undead horrors. A Draugr would rise from its tomb to terrorize the community, killing livestock and attacking anyone who dared approach its mound. They were a terrifying sign that something had gone horribly wrong in the transition between life and death. Defeating a Draugr was no simple task. They were notoriously hard to kill. To finally put one to rest, a hero often had to wrestle it back into its tomb, decapitate it, and sometimes burn the body to ashes and scatter them at sea. Only then could the Eggen Walker be stopped. This fear of the Draugr tells us something crucial about the Viking worldview. The real horror wasn't death itself, but the soul's failure to complete its journey. To be trapped between worlds, neither truly dead nor truly alive, that was the fate the Vikings dreaded most. The why, the soul, and the send-off. So, with all these destinations and dangers, how did a soul find its way? The answer lies in two things: the Vikings' unique idea of the soul, and the vital importance of the funeral. First off, the Vikings didn't think of the soul as one single thing, the way we often do. They believed in a multi-part soul, a complex assembly of different spiritual and physical parts. While the exact parts varied, several key elements pop up. There was the hammer, the physical body or shape. There was the hugr, representing the mind, will, and personality. The fylgja was a kind of attendant spirit, often in animal form, connected to a person's fate. And then there was the Hamingja, a person's innate luck and personal power, which could even be passed down through a family. This belief in a complex soul helps explain their varied afterlives. Upon death, these different parts could go to different places. The body, the hammer, stayed in the grave, while the mind, the hugr, might journey to hell. The Hamingja could be inherited by a descendant. It wasn't a tidy system, but it reflected a world where a person's essence was a multifaceted thing. Because this transition was so critical, the funeral was one of the most important rituals in Viking society. It wasn't just for mourning. It was a practical event to honor the dead and ensure their soul parts made it to the right place. The methods varied. Cremation was very common, with the body burned on a great funeral pyre. The idea was that the fire and smoke purified the body and helped carry the soul to the afterlife. The 10th century diplomat Ibn Fadlan left a stunning eyewitness account of a Rus chieftain's ship cremation, a massive ceremony involving sacrifices to accompany the master. Burial was also widespread, especially for the elite. The most famous examples are the spectacular ship burials, like the Oseberg ship in Norway. Here, the dead were placed in a real ship, which was then buried under a massive mound. The ship was a powerful symbol, a vessel to carry the dead on their final voyage. No matter the method, grave goods were essential. The dead were buried with things that reflected their life. Warriors with swords, craftsmen with tools, women with jewelry. They were also buried with provisions for the journey, like food, drink, and even sacrificed animals. These elaborate rituals reinforced social status and ensured the dead arrived in the afterlife with their honor intact, which was key to preventing them from becoming a dreaded Draugr. As we've seen, the pop culture image of the Viking afterlife is a pale shadow of the rich and complex reality. There was no single, unified belief. Where a soul went wasn't a moral judgment, but a consequence of how one lived, and more importantly, how one died. The warrior could be chosen by Odin or Freya. The common person found a quiet continuation of life in hell. The drowned sailor was claimed by the sea. And for some, the journey might be a transformation into a mound-dwelling ancestor, or even a return to the world through rebirth. This complexity reveals a profound truth about the Viking worldview. Their central focus wasn't on the next life, but on how one lived in the here and now. The most enduring immortality wasn't in a godly hall, but in the memory of the living. The Old Norse had a word for it, Dhamr. It means judgment, but more broadly, it was your reputation, the story told about you after you were gone. As a famous verse from the Havamal says, "Cattle die, kinsmen die, you yourself will also die. But the word of fame will never die, for the one who gets a good one." For the Vikings, your deeds, your honor, and your name were the only things that were truly eternal. Your legacy was your afterlife. If you found this journey into the true Viking afterlife fascinating, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the real history behind the myths. Let us know in the comments. Based on these beliefs, which path do you think your soul would have taken? Thanks for watching.